Kendrick stood frozen in the torrential downpour. He stared wide-eyed into the abyss and slowly sank to his knees. It was out there, circling him. He dimly hoped that it couldn't see or smell him in the rain. Maybe it was just as blind as he was. And then through the constant thrum of rain, he heard it. Heavy breathing, slowly coming closer. Kendrick jumped to his feet and sprinted through the forest, weaving around tree trunks, jumping over logs and rocks. His boot fell off and he slowed down, wincing with each step. Twigs and stones tore apart the tender flesh of his rotted foot. Kendrick staggered, shaking beneath the icy needles of rain, propelled by his surging adrenaline. He heard the rain's relentless assault against the surface of the river. He was getting closer to escape. Somewhere his predator was watching. He could feel it. Kendrick's bare foot slipped through the mud and he fell forward with a wet smack. His sense of fight or flight possessed him. He dug his hands into the marshy turf and dragged himself forward through the thick stalks and stems of swamp vegetation. Kendrick pulled himself over a slope and he slid into frigid, fetid water. The cold shocked him and he thrust his head up out of the water, panting and shivering. There was a flash of lightning and he saw spider-legged mangrove trees surrounding him. The jungle seemed empty, devoid of life. That meant it was nearby. Kendrick knew he couldn't run anymore. Each breath he took burned through his lungs. His body was numb from the cold and his heart struggled to keep the thick blood pumping in his veins. It was time to hide. He cautiously waded through the chest-deep water towards the mangroves. Kendrick crawled into a mangrove's cage of roots and peered out at the black mirror of the water's surface. It appeared he had fallen into a pond. His only chance at escape had been a pipe dream. All he had left to do was sit and wait, shivering and gripped by terror. Through the storm, Kendrick could hear footsteps slowly padding around the water's edge. Each footstep was carefully placed, methodical and silent. He heard the predator sniffing the air, followed by a long, low growl. Leaves brushed softly against feathers and leathery skin. The creature was circling the pond, trying to locate Kendrick in the storm. Kendrick carefully tucked himself further back into the mangrove's den and stared at the water's dappled surface. He held his breath until his lungs felt sucked dry. There was a flash of lightning, and he saw the silhouette of the creature reflected on the water's surface. It was heavily distorted, but Kendrick could clearly see the outline of the animal's body. It was taller than a man, with a straight tail and muscular limbs. The creature raised its long snout, sniffing the air. The hooked claws flicked in anticipation. The creature's jaws parted into a toothy, rumbling snarl. It was only 10 feet away. Kendrick trembled uncontrollably. Tears were lost with the rain on his face. A pitiful cry crawled from his lips like a worm, and he clasped his hands over his mouth to keep quiet. Urine flowed freely between his legs. Kendrick could hear the footsteps approaching slowly. The creature was taking its time. It knew that he had nowhere left to run. Kendrick's eyes began to adjust to the darkness. He saw the muscular legs of the creature standing before him. The sickle-shaped claws flexed and dug into the earth. Kendrick was petrified with fear. He could no longer think or comprehend his reality. He could only watch as the creature crouched in front of him and stared back with cold, calculating eyes. The creature spread its arms around the mangrove roots, cloaking the den with feathers. Its talons scraped against the root bark. One last embrace to ensure there would be no escape. The creature's eyes glowed yellow in the darkness. The feathers muffled the sound of the storm. Kendrick could only hear his own whimpering and the slow, steady breathing of the animal. It was so dark that he could barely see the jaws of the creature opening to reveal serrated teeth. The animal's hot breath, rancid with decay, washed over him. Kendrick could feel a desperate plea catch in his throat. "Please." The creature's head shot forward and it snatched Kendrick's throat in its jaws. The animal shook him violently from side to side, ripping the flesh of his neck like tissue. Hot blood ran down Kendrick's torso, and the creature let go of him. Kendrick fell backwards, screaming, and a fiery pain flared through his body as talons sliced his stomach open. The creature was savage, growling and indifferent while Kendrick shrieked and pounded its snout with his fists. In the last fleeting moment of consciousness, Kendrick watched as the creature buried its snout into his abdomen and tugged out coils of intestine. The last thing he felt was his own horrendous death rattle boring through the ragged holes in his throat. This was not the war he knew.
Primitive War is a story written by Ethan Pettis that brings dinosaurs and ancient beasts into a world that is both familiar to us and somehow so very distant from our present times, the Vietnam War. That audio reading you heard earlier was simply a taste of what this book will deliver to you. Dinosaurs, soldiers, visceral environments you can almost taste, and a whole lot of descriptive gore and death. I don't want to spoil the book for you, but I'm going to give you a quick review without ruining the story as much as I can. And we have a special interview that'll be coming after all of this. The dinosaurs are a real treat, and the way they are described as terrifying creatures, but still grounded in reality and treated like animals is a positive for me. There is a certain species of dinosaur that acts as a bit of a hacker and slasher, but it works in the same sort of context as the raptors in Jurassic Park. The humans in the story may appear stereotypical and like 80s action stars on the surface, which is fine for me, but throughout their mission you see some really intriguing inner battles that the characters struggle with, at times being even more threatening to their health than the animals trying to rip them apart. Speaking of that, this story is all about highly detailed kills, both done by humans and ancient beasts. It's like freaking Mortal Kombat or something. Some people can't take gore detailed in this matter, but others will eat it up and enjoy every bone breaking and every organ being ripped out. Primitive War is not just a mindless kill fest, it has moments of peace and tranquility, relatable interactions, and some emotional tugs that really make this book deep with variety in its storytelling. In short, I didn't expect this book to be as good as it was. On the surface, it appears to be a story you would find on the old Sci-Fi Channel or something, but damn does it deliver so much more than that. Alright, so now let's get to that special interview with the author of Primitive War, Ethan Pettis. Alright everyone, now we have the author of Primitive War himself, Mr. Ethan Pettis. So, how's life, Ethan? Introduce yourself, where are you from? Tell us all the cool stuff we should know about you.
Howdy, I'm a writer from Kentucky, 25 years old. I've been doing this for the past 6 years, writing about dinosaurs, playing didgeridoo, and daydreaming about dinosaurs every single day.
Hey, I'm sure plenty of us are doing that, especially everybody that's watching the channel right now. I love didgeridoos, by the way, and I'd like to hear you play sometime. It's a sweet instrument. But we're not here about the didgeridoos. Let's talk about your book, Primitive War. So with the whole story and like creation, with everything involved into this, this big book of yours, so like what made you think to use dinosaurs, badass guns, a hell of a lot of gore, the Cold War, the Vietnam War, like what made you think that was like the perfect setting and like environment for a book?
They seem to go hand in hand. I mean, every time, because I live in Kentucky and I've been to the Appalachian Mountains plenty of times, and every time I'm in a densely forested area, I can't help but think about dinosaurs, and that carried over into everything I learned about the Vietnam War. Like throughout high school, learning about the Vietnam War and the things that soldiers went through, and constantly wondering what else could be out in those densely wooded areas. Yeah. What else would you have to be afraid of? And dinosaurs always fit into that kind of environment.
For sure, dude. I mean, I live in the Appalachian Mountains myself, so like I totally know what you're talking about. I grew up on like a 25-acre farm, and I'd always go out and run in the woods, and I'd pretend to be a dinosaur. I'd pretend to be chased by a dinosaur. So like when you go out into the woods, it's nice to always have that primitive feeling of being like, what else is here and what's coming after me? And it always goes to being a dinosaur because, they're just so mysterious and they're dinosaurs. With the dinosaurs, though,
what made you choose to go the route you did with them specifically? You didn't just make them the Jurassic Park style dinosaurs. You decided to put feathers on them. So when it comes to the whole design of your dinosaurs, what made you take the more modernized approach? Did you just want to be accurate, or is it something you like more?
So it's both a stylistic choice and an accuracy choice. At the time that I was working on Primitive War, initially, it was still believed that Tyrannosaurs could have been feathered or had feather-like developments on their bodies. And I know that's up for dispute, or that's up for debate now, but I stand beside my original design, and specifically the ones that are more closely aligned with modern day birds. It allows for a lot more creative potential, and that was something else, is that I wanted to convey dinosaurs in a way that nobody had really experienced before, both in terms of the tone of the story that they were in and the way that they exist within the story that they're in.
Yeah, definitely. Like without spoiling the story, you definitely incorporated something different than just like the Jurassic Park style has been recycled over and over again for pretty much the last 20, 30 years almost. And how you use the new knowledge of dinosaurs, the wings potentially, the feathers and all that, it really worked well. And like you said, other than a few documentaries, there hasn't been anybody really doing that with the new dinosaur information. So like you were spot on with that. So moving on from the dinosaurs though, your human characters were pretty awesome as well. They were very I always thought they were very kind of Rambo-y, kind of Arnold back in the day, kind of 80s action star. But they were also more deep than that. Like they come across like that, just gun-toting badasses, but you went really deep with these characters. What made you decide to go that route with the human characters instead of just having them shoot guns and be cool badasses?
Because it was the only thing that seemed fair to reality. I mean, I wanted to make the dinosaurs as accurate as possible, and I wanted the human characters that exist in this tragic time of history, and I wanted to pay homage to what soldiers actually went through psychologically. I pretty much grew up reading war correspondence memoirs and war memoirs by former soldiers in different time periods, but Vietnam was always the one I was most intrinsically attached to, mostly because of the environment and the period. I mean, you had people that were devolving in the sense that they were butchering civilians and enemies alike, and you also had people that were drafted that had no intentions to ever, spill blood. And so it didn't feel right to have traditional, Rambo gun-toting soldiers. I wanted to have actual people with actual problems like schizophrenia and PTSD, and issues with psychological health and addiction.
Yeah, no, that really came across really well, and that's what the story really hits well on, is that you hit, of course you have the action, the dinosaurs, the gore, the shooting, and all that stuff, but you went really deep into the mentality of these characters and the mental health state, which has come out a lot more this last decade. People are taking mental health more serious than ever, so as I was reading that, I always kept being drawn into being like, dang, like, on surface, these just seem like badass soldiers, but like going in depth, it's like, okay, like these were real people. One thing I kind of wanted to bring up, just because it was kind of personal to me, and like I've never had this happen when I was reading or watching anything. At one point in this story, you actually brought up my hometown of Floyd County, and we talked about this over messaging, about how I had to hit you up. I was like, holy crap, dude, your character is from the town I'm like born pretty much and raised in, and I was like, holy crap, like it was blowing my mind. So that was just a special bit for me, and I know you've already told me why you used Floyd, but tell the audience why you used such a small random town that only has one stoplight.
everything in writing, and I think almost everything in creativity is derived from reality. And the greatest stories come from your own experiences and the experiences that are relayed to you. You'll never hear a greater story than that of, the person beside you. And so a lot of that speaks through Primitive War. I mean, character names, things that they say, stories that they tell, a lot of it's derived from reality, and the things that they struggle with and the things that they come from and their backgrounds are things that, I've recognized in my own life. And Floyd, Virginia, I mean, I've been there before. I actually went there for my first music festival back when I first graduated high school, and I was still working on the first draft of Primitive War. Yeah, Floyd, Virginia just stuck out in my mind as this idyllic, perfect little Appalachian hotspot in the mountains. And perfect for a rookie like Leon Varn to come from.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. It was really cool. And like hearing you say that right there, the perspective of you wrote a lot of this book from your own experiences. And you can tell that shows in the book. You can see that. And just like, I wanted to bring up Floyd because I live there and I'm from there and all that. But as an author, just hearing your experience, like, I experienced this, I put it into the book in my own way. Like, that's something that future authors and authors of all kinds could really take note on. If you're trying to write a book, take your real experiences. So that works out really good. But we'll finish up right now real quick. So I know you got a lot in store for the future, so let everybody know. Will there be a Primitive War 2? Do you have any other plans? What else do you have going on?
So this year there's a Primitive War audiobook coming out this summer, and there's also the second volume of Primitive War Dispatches, The Plague of Sheepa Totec, and there's also Primitive War 2, Animus Infernal, coming out this year. So 2 more Primitive War books are coming out this year. One is a episodic short story anthology that encompasses the 5 years between the first Primitive War and the first volume of Dispatches and Primitive War 2. So
a lot in store for the future, I see. So everybody, if you hear that, make sure to go get Primitive War 1 so you can get all in this story and get ready for the future. Ethan here has got a lot of cool stuff coming for you guys, and I hope you take some time to go and find Primitive War. So Ethan, where can people find Primitive War to get their copy if they want it?
Primitive War is on Amazon, and I believe it is free to read with Kindle Unlimited. You can also find bootleg copies on eBay and all other kinds of third-party websites. For some reason, it shows up on Barnes & Noble's website, and I have no idea why. And Target as well.
Okay, well, geez. Well, there you go. It's all over the place. Just type in Primitive War. I'll leave links down below so you can find this story. I highly recommend it. You guys all love dinosaurs. You love action. You love explosions. You love badassery. And this is the perfect book for you. So please, if you feel up to it, go support Ethan here and buy Primitive War.